Great. Well, we know so many of y'all just came out of a session, so we're going to give you a moment to get logged in. But just, heads up, we want to make this a very interactive session. So we have some questions that we're going to go through already, but at any time you want to ask a question, feel free to chat it in. If you have the ability to, come off mic, just somehow get my attention, let me know that you want to queue up to ask your question, and we'll get that done. We want it to be interactive, but we have lots of advice that we're excited to share with you. But thank you, David and Julia, for logging on. We appreciate it. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started with some introductions on Breaking the Glass and who I am, and then we're going to get our recruiters to give you a little bit more background about themselves. So first, before we get started, of course, thank you to Girl Develop It. This is one of many programs that we've done with them. It's been a very exciting time, and we're so excited to get invited back to this conference to host this session. It was actually a request that we do this session again. So we're really excited that, you've enjoyed all the advice and information we've been able to provide you. I'm Elizabeth Lamb. I'm the partnerships manager for Breaking the Glass, which is a corporate social responsibility program within Computer Futures. So I work on managing our partnerships with nonprofits and other women in tech organizations and employee resource groups to talk about career development, diversity and inclusion, and tech talks as well. We've done programs with Dell, IBM, Walmart, Women Who Code. So it's been really great working with so many different people. But like I said, at the start of the session, if you just logged in, we want to make this interactive. I'll be fielding a few questions, but if there's ever a time where you want us to stop and you have a specific question you want us to answer, please let us know. But without further ado, I'm going to let Caitlin introduce herself, and then let's go Courtney Tyler.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin. I am a mobile recruiter here in San Francisco and at Computer Futures. And do I share one fact, or what do I do? Just anything else?
Anything else? You recently also moderated another panel with us. How about you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I participated in the Women Who Code mobile panel. And what I did was basically answer a few questions that the audience had about recruitment, things to prep for. And I'm excited to do it here as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Courtney?
Hey guys, I'm Courtney. I am a Salesforce recruiter in the DC office, but I pretty much work all throughout the East Coast. And I've done, a few events with BTG. Let's see, I know we have one coming up that I'm starting to plan that's kind of around veterans. Being a military spouse has kind of given me like a super interesting perspective into being a recruiter, and especially with Salesforce being so into like helping veterans and stuff. So it's definitely been a cool perspective to take on. Excited to answer y'all's questions and see how we can help.
Thank you, Courtney. Tyler?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Miracle. I work for Computer Futures. I manage our business intelligence and analytics practice here. I've been with the company for about 3 years. And like I said, I primarily work with data engineers, data scientists, and on the data visualization kind of reporting side. So those are the types of developers and engineers that I'm working with. I've been on the Breaking the Glass board for about 6 months now. And most recently, I moderated a panel on increasing access to technology and kind of breaking down those barriers to entry for either younger folks who are coming out of school and wanting to get into tech, or someone who's been in the workforce for a little while and decided to make a change and see kind of what they can do to get into the industry.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tyler. Right now, I am dropping some links in the chat for y'all to get connected with our speakers and myself. So if there's anything that you wanted to connect with offline or continue the conversation. Or if you happen to be a mobile Salesforce or data developer and you want to talk to them specifically about finding a new contract role. But, we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, chat in your questions. We want to make this interactive. This session is for you specifically, our folks attending. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our first question, which is, what are the biggest trends that you see from hiring managers looking to hire technical talent within your field specifically?
I think I can kind of start with this one. So I think with Salesforce, obviously, the trends are always like changing. But right now, I feel like we've seen a ton of like clients looking for something with like anyone with very niche, like specific technologies. So like anything with, instead of just like your normal like sales and service cloud, like looking at like CPQ and Einstein Marketing Cloud, anyone who can kind of not just have experience in it, but almost like specialize in it. Those are the ones that we've been seeing a lot of, because obviously they're a little hard to find, and sometimes if they can't find them, they have to go to Salesforce directly, which is a little bit more expensive. So that's why they've been trying to like find contractors and anyone who can kind of specialize in that. But I also think they're looking, we've started to see like candidates who are normally looked at for like an admin role. They've wanted to see, kind of a hybrid between admin and developer. Or even just like an admin who like knows a little bit of coding or can like read code has kind of come up, just so like managers and clients can like utilize them in different ways. So I think those are like the two biggest ones that I've seen recently, at least like within Salesforce.
And I can speak on mobile. In mobile, because it's an application, I think what we're seeing across all types of industries are they actually pick up during the holidays or when you expect for candidates or for people to use their phone more often. So like with Black Friday and Christmas shopping coming up, there's been a lot of hiring because there's a lot of maintenance on the applications, as well as just developing new features along there. And I also, in terms of technologies and specific trends, what I found was a lot of clients like to see candidates that have built an application from the ground up. So has built all aspects of the app. And I think that's important. Even if you're doing like projects on your own and you've done that, that's still very impressive to the client. So that shows that you are very familiar with like the problems that come up with building a whole application, feature development, and of course, maintenance. So that's something that is always important to clients.
Thank you. Yeah, Tyler, any trends that you're seeing on the data side?
Yeah, I would say when I first started, we had a lot of testing up front before we even moved to the interview stage with managers, whether that be like a technical screen, coding specifically, whether it be Python, SQL, whatever, just any generic tool. But I think a lot of managers have come to realize that working is not like school. Like it's not closed note. You can talk to your colleagues, you can talk to people on site. And so a lot of our interviews now, there's no testing prior. When you go in, it's much more of a brainstorming or kind of a hypothetical situational interview. And so that's definitely one of the biggest trends that I've seen is they'll kind of set you up in a hypothetical environment and they really want to understand the way you think and work through problems, much less your technical ability, I would say. Obviously, you have to have the technical skills for the role, but it's much more how you're thinking through problems and like critical thinking as a whole over just, can you code this? Can you do that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I've seen a lot more like interviews recently have been all like scenario based.
Mhm.
And especially like obviously like we know that like at least like within CF we do a lot of like technical stuff before, so we know like when we're passing off candidates like for these interviews, we know that they're like going to be strong technically, and our clients definitely know that. So I think that's where they want to bring in the scenario based questions, is making sure that like, okay, if they're like faced with this, how would they handle that? And it's a lot about like trying to also like bring in your new perspective and ideas. I think that managers really want to see that recently, is like someone bringing in new stuff that like they've never thought about before. So I think those scenario based questions are honestly like very, very used right now.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, we're used to so much change lately. The fact that like you can show that you can change and adapt, and you just like you think in sync with the rest of the team, I think goes really far. Also, attendees, if you even in the chat want to like let us know what your technical specialty is as well, maybe there's some things that we can provide, like some specific advice for you. But yeah, next question is, how do developers stand out to recruiters? What can they do to, pique your interest into getting that phone call and saying like, hey, I have a job for you, or an opportunity that you might want to hear about?
I would say the biggest, LinkedIn. That's where primarily I talk to all of the candidates that I'm speaking with. Is I find them on LinkedIn, or I use Dice a bit, but LinkedIn is my bread and butter, I would say. So being very active, having any references that you're able to have on your LinkedIn, just reaching out to old managers that you've had in the past and having just a very thorough page. And what I mean by that is not just list like copy and pasting your job description of the role you had, but tell me what the project goal was, any issues that came up, how you worked through that. That's my biggest thing, is when I'm reading people's resumes, I really want to have, because I'm not technical at all. So if I want to know just a little bit more, the goals, more detail, the better, not just built reports in Tableau, SQL queries, things like that. So just being as thorough and like building your LinkedIn profile out as possible.
Completely agree with that, because I feel like a lot of the resumes, like after a while, when it's like all developers or all admins, a lot of them end up looking the same. So like what's gonna make people stand out is like, okay, like what did you do on this project? What was the goal? Like what was your part in it? Like did you specifically lead it? Were you just a part of like a larger team? Like what was the actual goal of the project? And like especially when you're like developing something, like okay, like what part of it did you develop? What was it meant to do? And like how did you get it to like the end goal? And then I think a huge thing is also like how did that affect the business in turn? Because I think that's something that a lot of people kind of leave out, is like not only like this is what they did, but how did it like like increase like user adoption, or increase like help with revenue, anything that like can kind of show how it specifically helped the business, I think is going to be like really huge to kind of stand out. So any like numbers or percentages you can include are definitely like, I know like that catches my eye, and like that's what I want to like make stand out. But then also on LinkedIn, I definitely think that using the recommendations like at the bottom, whenever I see that, I'm like, and I read through them, I'm like, okay, like clearly like this is something where multiple people have like reached out and said how great this person is, and that like gives me a ton of confidence like in the candidate, and makes me think like, okay, like if they've been so good at like all these other projects, like I want them on like a project for one of my clients. So I think like utilizing like the recommendations more, I think that's going to be huge and kind of helping boost your LinkedIn a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I agree with everything Courtney and Tyler said. I guess specific to my industry, or I guess with Courtney's as well, I know there's certifications that you can take. I like to see what you do outside of the core work or projects that you're working on. So like if you're working on a personal project, or if you're building out your own applications for fun on your own, or if you're taking the time to take courses or get certifications on specific things like Salesforce, then I think it's really cool to see and it will really stand out. Also, just being able to talk through your projects, like they said, if you're on the phone with them and you're just reading out the technologies for me, I'm not going to understand it. It's just going to sound like a lot of like words coming at me. But if you're able to talk through exactly what you worked on, what was the goal of the project, like they said, it definitely stands out. Yes.
Yeah, definitely with certifications and any volunteer work. I think that's a huge thing that people try to do within Salesforce, especially to kind of like ramp up quickly when they're just starting out, is doing that volunteer work. So putting that on your LinkedIn and on your resume is going to stand out, that like, okay, maybe you had like a few months between jobs or something. Like, what were you doing in that time span? Were you just kind of like, searching, or were you actively like trying to kind of like get better at your skills and kind of grow? So I think just showing that like outside of work, you're also doing like things to like kind of just increase like your knowledge and kind of grow.
And I think
Absolutely.
there's also a section on the top of your LinkedIn where you can add your physical resume. So if you've built it, 100% put it there. And then everyone in the data visualization space, data science space, everyone pretty much has a portfolio of deliverables that they've done previously. And obviously, a lot of people have to either blur or take out certain information just based on proprietary information and NDAs they've signed for past roles. But I think that's going to be a requirement moving forward, is some sort of portfolio of past work. So I think everyone should have that, and in some capacity on their LinkedIn, or be able to produce it in some way.
That's like such a good point, because I actually worked a role previously with one of my clients, where they wanted, for like a business analyst, they wanted to see their documentation. And I kind of knew right away, as soon as I got that from candidates, like I could pick out the one that I was like, this one's going to get it, just looking at the documentation. It was like 100 pages of like very thought out, like organized documentation. It was amazing. And so like that also stood out to the client. So I think that's a thing of like, obviously, like if you have to, make sure it's anonymous or kind of take out like certain parts of it, like we completely understand. But I think just having that ready, and even like if a client doesn't need it, just like proactively sending it to the recruiter and being like, hey, like, can you send this across as well? And just kind of show them like an example. And they had that going into an interview. And so they could really like ask questions about it, and get a little bit more info. So I think that really helped the candidates, like specifically who got the position. I think that really won them over.
Great. Yeah. And my last little bit I was going to chime in, is just, we talked about LinkedIn recommendations earlier. Don't be afraid to ask for one. Like if you are like setting yourself up for like your next project and you've had a really great relationship with someone on your team, just ask them to do it, because a lot of times they're just not going to think about doing it because they're really busy. But the moment you ask them, they're like, I'm so flattered that you like want my recommendation. So just like, don't be scared to ask for those things as well. I know when I've been asked to do it, I immediately write it. I'm like, I would love to do that. So don't be afraid to like ask for those good recommendations. So next question is, how would you recommend a candidate prepare themselves for their first conversation with you? What's going to like make it feel like they're ready to go and ready to share with you?
I think it kind of goes along what we've almost like talked about, is like really understanding like your projects and not just reading off your resume. Because if I get on a call where someone's reading off the resume, I'm like, okay, yes, but like what else? Like I want more. I want to know more about the project. And so I think just really having a good understanding of like knowing what you've done for each project, and almost like kind of thinking about that going into the call. And also like things that you want in general, like what are you actually looking for in a position? Because that's going to help me out so much, is knowing like not just like, oh, I want this and like this, but like I'm looking for more money. I'm like, okay, which one is like the main like thing that you're going to be looking for in a position? Like I think having just all of that kind of prepared and thought out before is honestly super helpful.
Yeah, 100%. When I'm that first initial call, you have three main things that you want to get: the who, what, and why. I want to know who you are, what you've done in the past, not just working, but you as a person too. What, like specifically your projects. What are you able to provide to my client that either is being required, or maybe it's just like in addition to what they're looking for that's relevant. And kind of why you're looking to leave. Is it a management issue, something specific that we need to make sure is not in this client environment? Are you just passively looking, but really understanding why we're looking for that next step? Because that is going to show recruiters the commitment. And if that why isn't there and isn't right, it is a red flag in our head every single time. And it can subconsciously make us not push as hard for you because we don't have the confidence that you'll either take an interview or take a role that we've submitted you for if we don't really understand why you want it or why you want to leave. So, and I think that's something you need to think about too as a candidate is why are you looking? What made you change your status on LinkedIn as open to new opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, bouncing just what off Tyler and Courtney said, just be honest in this conversation with us. Like that first conversation where it's not an interview. It's not like all the information that we're going to bounce off to the client. We're here to help you. And if you're honest with us from the get-go, the process will be a lot easier. You'll get mostly everything you want because we'll let you know if it is everything you want. And just always, make sure you have your priorities lined up for us to talk about. And yeah, just be honest with your experience.
Yeah, definitely. Honest, like my candidates being transparent is like the one thing that I can ask of them. That's honestly so helpful. Even if like it's something I don't want to hear, but you're very transparent with me. I'm like, okay, thank you, because that actually helped me a lot more than like saying, oh, like I really want to interview with this client, even though you like really don't want to. Like having that transparency is going to help like me in the long run, which is going to help you. But I think also just kind of going into it thinking of like maybe not just thinking of it about us as like just a recruiter, but someone who could actually like really help. Because I think some people I get on the phone, they kind of just I guess don't realize that like we can also like help you guys by creating relationships and really opening up like your mind to things. So I think like just also being open to a lot of things. I mean, that's gonna help us, and that's gonna honestly like want us to like help you more. So I think just being open and transparent is definitely key.
Mhm.
Much. Yeah, and from what I see from y'all being recruiters, y'all really are advocates. And like you said, like it's not the interview, it's not the hiring manager. Y'all are advocating, and the best like way y'all can advocate is if you know your candidates' goals really well, so that you can help them get aligned with something for their best next step. And that leads into our next question: is there can be a lot of anxiety around whether a job that you're applying for is actually aligning with like your current skills and experiences, that it is like that proper next step forward, and like the job is the job they say it is. Do you have like any advice for candidates when they're vetting the job opportunity presented to them?
I guess my piece of advice on anxiety and getting prepped for that is just, ask us as recruiters a lot of questions. Like make sure, if anything is on your mind, let us know, and we will get that information for you as best as we can. And we'll be there to help you along the way. Like we'll be there to interview prep you because we're working directly with the client. So we more often know exactly what to expect. We'll get you that. Just make sure you're asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, and
I would say, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would say, because we, like Caitlin said, we speak directly to the clients as well. So we're not only, when the job comes available, they reach out to us and say, hey, Tyler, Caitlin, I have a new job open. Here's the job description. Go out and find it. But we always set up, before we even start recruiting, we set up calls with these clients to not, yes, we have the job description, but a lot of times that's just a generic job description that they've gotten from HR and they'll send it over. But we really, at Computer Futures, we really try to narrow it down and understand the project, why this new position is open, what key gaps do they have, and really understand that before we even start recruiting. So we can have that conversation with you and really prep you. Your experience at the Home Depot doing XYZ is exactly the gap that they have. And to really explain, like you need to pinpoint that specific project and explain it, or vice versa anywhere. So really, I mean, we are a resource for you. So try and milk it for everything you can. That's my biggest piece of advice.
That's honestly such great advice. Because reading these job descriptions are sometimes I'm just like, who wrote this? Because do they know what they're talking about? Because sometimes it really does not come from the manager. It comes like from HR, who's just like very general, and they're not like, they think a developer is supposed to be like an admin, and good Lord. But it's that's like where you can utilize us is like, okay, it says like maybe we see a job description or like we, something gets sent over and it's like, okay, how important is like this one skill? Is it like a make it or break it kind of thing? I think that's where we can come in handy, honestly, because we know like where our clients are like flexible on some of those things. And if like, like one of your skills and like something they really need is you have a lot of experience in that, but something else that they also need like isn't as strong, like having maybe stronger experience and like the more important one is really going to stand out. And so like that's something that we can help with. Um, but I also think that some of my candidates have been kind of nervous going into an interview where they're like, okay, it says that like, they're looking for people with this kind of skill, but I don't have, or like this technology, but I don't have that exact technology. And I think being honest with us about that, and being like, I don't have like that experience. What should I do? And with that, it's just all about like, okay, you may not have that exact experience in this technology, but like, what kind of similar technology do you have experience with? What kind of experience do you have around it? What do you know about it? I think with that, it's all about, if you're missing something, or like you're just not sure, I would just give as much information as you can. Because I think the more like you show that you may not have, a skill or a technology, the more you show that like you do know what it is and you have similar experience, like that's going to give the client a little bit more confidence and honestly you more confidence because you know what to say going into that.
Absolutely. And do not have any, even if it's not on the job description, don't have anything on your resume that you are not 100% comfortable talking about. Because even if you put Python on your resume, but the job has nothing to do with Python, it wasn't even on the description, chances are the manager's going to know some questions about Python just to see if you were truthful. And I've had so many candidates get rejected from jobs because they've put something on their resume that we didn't even talk about because it wasn't in the job description. And the manager asked a question about it, and the candidates come back to me and said, well, why was I rejected from this job because of this skill? It's not a part of this job. You put it on your resume, the manager asked, and it doesn't make you look like a trustworthy person when you've put it on there as something you're able to speak about or you have experience with or even knowledge of. So I would make sure anything on your resume, relevant or not to the position, is fair game in an interview.
Absolutely. That's so important. Everything in the interview process should be there to make you look good, and to set yourself up for success. All right. So our next question is, the recruiters put you forward. Then there's been an interview request from the manager. You're going back to your candidate. What advice are you giving them before they first speak to the manager for their first interview?
Oh my gosh, interview prep is probably one of my favorite things to do, because I think it really can make or break an interview for a candidate. So I think I always give the advice of like go in, try not. I mean, obviously it's harder, like it's easier said than done, but like try just to be yourself in an interview and not like try to present yourself as this like very like technical person who like needs to have everything perfect. Like just be yourself because a lot of the times like personalities can sell themselves as well. Like I have clients who they really want someone who's going to be outgoing and personable like right away. And so I think that's huge. Just go into it like being confident in yourself and like knowing your skills, but also like just try to have like a good like casual like kind of conversation with them. Um and then always like obviously like now that we're doing everything over video, like make sure like your video and like your audio is all set, but also make sure you have like a good background. Because if you're somewhere where people are like walking in and out, like that can be so distracting. And I've had a lot of managers like say that and they're like, this was really weird on the interview. Like just make sure you have like a good background and there's no one that's gonna be walking in or out. Obviously, like if a dog or something like pops in, like that's one thing and kind of funny. But if it's like somewhere where you're in a public space, I would try not to do that. And then I think the last thing I always tell my candidates to go in with questions, because the more questions you ask, the more like the clients are going to see that you're clearly interested in the role. And that's a huge seller, I think, is knowing that like someone in an interview is actually super interested in trying to learn more, trying to know more. So I think just completely going in with questions and even like thinking of more throughout the interview, that's going to be super helpful in like selling yourself as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you mentioned the mic and internet stability. I think that's always important. Every meeting you go into, please, before 10 minutes before, make sure everything's working, make sure your camera's working, make sure you know your password. I've had trouble signing in 1 minute before I'm supposed to host the meeting before, and I learned my lesson, I swear. But other than that, always do your research on both the client, like not just the company itself, but always like the people that you'll be speaking to. What we do is we always try to send you exactly who you'll be speaking to, so you can look on LinkedIn, maybe find some things to talk about, just to ease the conversation in the beginning, or just understand, like, know exactly what role they fill at that company. That's always important, and always just wear a nice shirt. I think wearing a nice shirt always changes things. I did have a guy once not wear a nice shirt. I think it actually kind of ruined his chances a bit, but yeah, that's always important. And then also just before going to interview, make sure you have some questions prepped for the end of the interview, just to show that you're interested in the role and that you're paying attention to the company itself. So yeah.
I definitely, what Caitlin just said it's always my biggest point of advice is know your audience. So you should have, if your recruiter is not sending you a personnel background on everyone that's in the interview, every panelist, every manager that's going to be in there, then they're not doing their job correctly, because they should know either personally or an account manager, someone should know this manager who's interviewing you and has a personal connection with them. So if they're a mountain biker, you should know that. If they are very goal oriented and very just want to know exactly what you're able to provide for them, then that's the type of interview you should give. If they're very personal and talkative and are okay just having a conversation, and that's the type of interview it should be. You very much want to mirror their energy. And I think my second point is always, if you don't know the exact problem or gap that the manager is trying to fill or fix with this new hire, the chances of you getting the job are slim to none. So you really need to go in knowing that. And if you don't, you need to tell your recruiter prior, and he or she needs to find out very quickly. And then you need to write down the exact project or experience that make you qualified to fill that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way that you said that. You're going in there to solve a problem. You should know exactly what that is, and then be able to talk about how great you're going to be at solving that problem as well. I also love the fact that you said, if your recruiter isn't providing you insight on the room you're about to walk into, they're not doing their full job. And that just goes to show that, the recruiter is there on your team as well. They're another advocate. It's really just a great tool to have in your toolbox when you are looking for your next step as well. So, don't be hesitant or overwhelmed to get a recruiter involved with your next job process. And then let's see. Next one is, okay, so what does the salary negotiations process look like for candidates that do have a recruiter involved with the process?
I would say 100% you need to let the recruiters handle that. If it is a contract job, or even if it's a full-time role that you're working through a recruiter, it's going to be in your best interest to let the recruiter handle it. Just because you don't want anything to get lost in translation. A recruiter's always going to try to get you as much money as possible, because we're paid in a way where we either have a markup or something like that. So we're always going to do what's in your best interest. So I've had clients previously try to not undercut anyone, but just try to see and what are you looking for this position? Just to try to get in there and see kind of what they're able to do, if they're able to save a couple bucks. So I would always encourage any candidate to say, I've spoken with my recruiter, Tyler, about the salary expectations, and I'm comfortable with them. And then if it needs to be another conversation after that, we will have that on your behalf. But we are the ones with the capital with this client right now. You have provided no value for them yet. It's in our best interest to do it. And then if 6 months down the road, if we need to revisit, you've shown and proven your value, then we can have a conversation again, maybe all three of us, but let us handle it up front. And then down the road, once you've proven your worth or built any sort of capital with them, then we can use it.
I would also say with that, like if you are going to like do that where you're like asking for more even later down the road, or like, you know, if we've worked with you before maybe, and then for the next one you're asking for more, I would have have your reasons as to why, and not just like, you know, like, oh, like, I've had like one more year of experience. Like, what makes you like so much more valuable and marketable? Because that's going to help us do our job of getting you more. Like if we just go to a client and we like ask for more and we don't really have anything to back it up with, like we're not going to get much movement. So the more information and like, you know, let's say you've gotten like 5 more certifications, like, okay, that's big. Like, let me know that, because that's going to help me do my job to get you more money. And then I think also going into the process, I would say, like sometimes it is like we're going to, you know, talk about numbers and stuff before we put you forward for an interview. And that's what we're going to like tell the client based off of that. So if like halfway through the interview process, you're like, oh, like now I want more, that puts us like in a really weird situation where we then have to go like ask the client for more, when we've already sent them one number. So I think like going into it, say like, even if you're like wanting to shoot yourself a little high, like do it. It's better than us having like later on to go ask for more, because then that also sometimes puts the client like makes them a little worried, like, okay, this person's asking for more. Are they actually going to take the job? Like what's going on? Like it's going to make them uneasy, and that may like cause them to go with another candidate over you, which we don't want them to do, obviously, just because of like, you know, because of a number. So I think like just having that number like set in your head and telling us up front is honestly super helpful. It'll save a lot of headache down the road.
Yeah, just bouncing right off what Courtney said. In the initial phone call, what I like to do with every candidate is I like to ask them for 3 numbers. I ask them for their, you know, hourly rate that they're most comfortable with, and then the rate that they would be over the moon about, and then the walkaway point. So like which rate would it be for the walkaway? And what we'll do is we'll try to negotiate to get you to that over the moon number, but you know, we'll understand exactly what you're looking for. And if you're honest with us from the beginning, we'll do our best to negotiate with the client directly. So just like Tyler said and Courtney said, we'll do the negotiation for you. But as long as you're honest about exactly what rates you're looking for, we'll do our best to get you that higher number.
And really understand why you're asking for more. Is it just a situation of I want more because I think I'm great, which everyone is obviously, but understand, are you going to lose this position because I'm being greedy and just want a little bit more? We can always try. Listen, everyone wants more money at the end of the day, but getting out of an interview and saying, this job sounds like I'd be taking on a lot more than I initially thought, I'm going to need X number of dollars more, that's not really a reason. Be specific and just give me all the information so I'm able to take it back to the client.
Again, being honest up front, have that confidence in yourself at the initial discussion with your recruiter. I know a lot of us, like when we're going through the job process, it can be like, oh, I just need to find work. And then like you get your hopes up and you're like, oh, okay, I can start asking for these more things. It's like, no, like try your best to figure out like exactly what you want when you get started. So like a lot of people aren't going back and forth on what, you know, each other's expectations are as well. And then also, I just wanted to let everyone know we have about 15 minutes left in the session. We really would love to answer any specific questions that you have for us. Obviously, we have lots of information to give you, but if you want to chat those in, if you're able to get off, a mic and just chat with us as well. We'd love to have like that dialogue as well. But in the meantime, I will jump into our next question, which, I touched a little bit about that, was what are the best ways to manage expectations between recruiter and candidate, and between interviewee and hiring manager as well? Just like things that we can do to avoid conflict in the process.
I would say after every conversation where information is introduced for the first time, either whether it be from the recruiter or it be from the candidate, there needs to be a follow-up email outlining everything. And then there needs to be, whoever sent the email, there needs to be a reply with confirm that all looks good, or wait a minute, we missed this point. We need to make sure that's in there. And just make sure, just not only to get it in writing, so it's not going to be like, I gotcha down the road, like, look, you confirmed it here, but just making sure that we're not missing anything. There's no steps being missed. And just make sure on the conversation, when people can miss things on conversations, I talk very fast, and I'm not a person who can type while talking. It's very much after my conversations, I can scribble notes. I always keep a notepad right next to me, and I can scribble notes while we're talking. But then I go back and I annotate my conversations on my computer. So I know I miss things. And so that's why I like to send those emails, and I always end it with, did I miss anything? Please make any additions that you need. And it's not even something that we talked about that I missed. If after the conversation, you've had a second to digest, you're like, wait a minute, I want more money, or I don't want this portion, or I do want this portion of a role. Make sure that we have everything written down and we've talked about it. That's my biggest piece of advice.
I would also say, like, be honest if you are interviewing anywhere else. Because if we don't have that transparency, and like, we're going to think like, oh, like, they said they're only interviewing with us, or they're not actively interviewing, and like, they're just kind of passively looking. But then we get down to it where, like, the client's kind of deciding on who to go with. Like, we obviously, if we think you're going to accept another offer, like, we may not push as much for you because like you're in all these other like finals, but then if there's enough, like, if you don't tell us that you're in all these interviews, and then it gets there, and then we're waiting for like a week for you to make a decision, like, that's going to make the client, like, honestly so uneasy. And it's going to confuse us a lot too, because like, we don't, like, should we have pushed for you if you were like having all these other thoughts and you just didn't tell us, even though we asked? Like, tell us if you were in other interview process, tell us like your thoughts, your feelings around those, because that's going to help us like know how much we have to push for you. Like, I recently had a time where like I was trying to figure out like which candidate to get into like an interview slot like this week instead of next week. And obviously, like, I wanted to put in the candidate who had like, a few upcoming interviews over someone who didn't have any other interviews, because I'm like, okay, I want them to go first, so that like we can still keep them in consideration, and they can still like keep us in consideration. So it's also going to help us push things along faster, which is like why we ask. So that's like a really good way to manage our expectations. It's just to be honest with us again, and like tell us if you're interviewing anywhere else, and like where your thoughts are at, like, for all those.
Yeah, definitely. That's super important to understand if your candidates are interviewing elsewhere. Definitely. One thing I'd like to add is just, setting realistic timelines from both our side and your side. Like, if you say you're going to give us your resume by tomorrow, then please give us your resume by tomorrow so that we can forward that over. Sometimes we'll have to chase for this information, and it's not good for the client for us to, say that something's coming and nothing's coming. Same thing with you guys. Like, if you had if you were really interested in a role, if we are setting timelines from each other, then I expect that to happen.
I think with that too, and like when you're like giving your availability for interviews, like, really tell us like, okay, this is the times I really can make time for. Because if I've had that happen this week, if we went in saying like, oh, let's do this time, and then we had to reschedule to a time like they were, they agreed that they could do, and then they're like, oh, like, never mind, can't do that. Like, be honest with us and upfront about what times you actually can do, because that makes our lives like 10 times easier of going to them being like, these are the absolute times, like there's not anything changing. Like that's just it's going to help everything go along smoothly and faster.
Yeah. And to add to that, I mean, of course, schedules change. We understand that. But, once that does change, like, and if you remember that you've given us those times, just update us. Let us know before we come back to you with the time that doesn't work anymore. Like, let us know if there's been an update and there's new times to send over.
Absolutely. And recruiters are very pushy by nature. I know I work on it all the time, but we're going to push you for as many options for interviews as possible. We're going to push you to work as fast as you can to get us the things we need. So don't yes man us. Like, do not tell us something's an option when it's not. It's okay if it's not. I will find another solution, but just don't set up an unrealistic expectation, essentially, if it's really not possible, because we'll find a workaround. But if we have to do something twice, that's when we could lose out to another competing candidate or another competing firm. Let's try to keep things as simple as possible, while working as fast as possible too.
You. Yeah, that's so important. I mean, it is like you are working with another adult who is advocating on your behalf. Like in that moment, you can kind of think of like, talking to like a coach if you played sports, or like any sort of like academic counselor that you had growing up. It's not about fully like saying, yeah, like you said, being a yes man. It's about saying, this is my life and how I'm going to work and like show up best as well. And I think like, a lot of us can get in the trap of like wanting to say yes to everything before we know it's like realistic. So even say like, hey, give me an hour to double check my schedule and I will just confirm like that time's good for you, instead of like saying yes first. So our next question goes into, celebrating ourselves as well. This is, a women's conference as well. I know that can be something that a lot of women struggle with, but, not necessarily just women as well. So any advice for folks that like during you're doing interview prep and you can just tell, like they're using too many we statements, they're, brushing their achievements down a little bit. Like what are some things that you've done to get them to like tap into that confidence of celebrating themselves during that interview that doesn't come across cocky or anything like that, but like just really like gets the manager being like, yeah, I'm sure of my skills, like, and I'm sure of how like I'm going to be presenting myself to you as a potential employee.
So I think that goes along with something that I said previously of like, if you know that you don't have like a certain skill, but they're going to ask about it, like no, like obviously you don't want to say just like, oh, like I don't have experience with that. Like know what you do have experience with that's similar, or that would help like you learn that skill quickly. Like tell them that, like always try to turn it around and focus it in a positive way. I think is going to be huge, because that just shows clients like obviously you have so much confidence, and like you may not have experience with something, but like at least you know the space and you know what you're talking about, so that's always good. And then I think also like looking at your projects and thinking like, okay, like what was I just part of this team? Did I manage? Did I lead anything? Like, was I a mentor for anyone? Like, literally put in anything you can about that. If you were like, the person who did most of the work on the team, like, and you can say like you led the team or you managed like a certain part of that, like, say that. Like, even if, like that wasn't in your job description or something, just like, say that you like led a team if you truly did. Obviously like don't like, lie and say you did when you didn't. But I think just like picking out little things like that, and like also just taking a look at like all of your wins, and really like I even do that like at the end of the week. I love to like look at my wins for the week and like see what I actually accomplished, and like just like those small things I think like really help. So being able to just like think of all of your wins, that you had maybe when you were working or like on a certain project, and highlighting those like as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, mine's pretty similar to what Courtney said. This was an advice that I got recently because I was having some confidence issues, but someone said, like with that, it's usually you're being subjective, but just go into the interview being really objective. Like think about all the things that you've done and then just hone in on those things and don't worry about anything else that comes with that. Just exactly what you've done. Just go in there and present them and it comes off really confident. You know exactly what you did. You know what you worked on. And I think that should really help with like confidence because again, confidence really comes with like a subjective matter, but just going in, presenting everything and all the numbers, like technology, specific keywords that you've really worked on, I think it would really help.
I think great points, but I think also it goes back to preparation and having the portfolio and that sample work. If your recruiter hasn't sent your references, your portfolio, your sample work, and all of that you've compiled before the interview to the manager, that he or she is not doing their job to the fullest ability. And it comes into play right when you're in the interview. You can say, if you're trying to elaborate on a specific example or say you have a certain skill, you can simply say, I know Tyler sent you over this specific reference about that on this project XYZ. My manager gave that reference for me and it outlines exactly what I was able to deliver. So having not only you give the confidence and like exude confidence in the interview, but having others be able to speak on your behalf without even being there and having sample work like that, that's huge.
I think also like if you are nervous or like worried about something about the interview, like I think it's best to come to us beforehand. Because honestly, I love like helping my candidates, like pump them up, like get them excited, like tell them they're going to do amazing. Like every single time I have an interview, I send like a candidate like the same little like GIF that says I'm rooting for them. Like I think just like small things like that we can do to help you and like make sure that you're excited, like you're gonna do great. Like that. I mean, that's like a huge thing. As I forgot like where this came from, but like pump. Like how do you best like feel powerful before an interview? Like for me, for some reason, it's like I love like getting the perfect interview outfit. And like, I always like, whenever I go into an interview, I try to stand up beforehand instead of just like sitting down and waiting. Like I like to stand up because that makes me like kind of gain a little bit more confidence. So I think like also like go into like, even if it's like literally talking to yourself in a mirror, like telling yourself you're going to be great, like that helps. It literally helps people. Like if you have to listen to like music to pump yourself up, like get you excited, or just like look at all your wins and be like, okay, I got this. Like I think like doing whatever makes you feel like kind of like empowered, I think is super helpful. Cause I mean, that's honestly how I think got me the job that I'm in. Is I like sat there and I like had the best interview outfit. I was so excited. Like I stood up before, and I think like that just like boosted my confidence. So I think like even just doing that and like making yourself like a pre-interview like kind of routine is going to be super helpful.
Yeah, and if you need to do a practice session too, every recruiter will do that with you. No one's going to say no. And chances are too, we've placed someone on that team previously. We typically do repeat business with our clients. So we can set up a practice run with someone that's either already been through the interview process or is on that team currently that we know. Just try to use us for every single resource you can, and just ask for anything. And we're fixers. We'll try to make it work.
I love that. And all the, talking about like prepping yourself up and getting yourself psyched up. I always know, like, even if I have like a phone call with someone that I know is going to be like really important, I make sure that like I'm smiling like while I'm listening to them as well. And so it's like just like kind of like getting your brain in the right mood to just like have a good time with it. Like it shouldn't necessarily be something that like you have to walk away feeling like, oh, I just survived that. You can be like, oh, wow, that was like really exhilarating. And I had like a really great time learning more about that. So anyway, we have about 2 more minutes left in our session. I haven't seen any questions come through, so I'm just gonna round robin real quick. Any last closing advice you have for our attendees as they, work with recruiters? Hopefully it might be one of you on the call as well. I did drop their LinkedIn profiles, so reach out. to them. We also have like a team of software development recruiters as well, because I know we just are representing mobile BI and Salesforce here. But we're happy to, continue this conversation offline. But like I said, I took a minute. Y'all go ahead.
I was going to say for last words, really find a recruiter or, like a few who you can create good relationships with and who can really be a true advocate for you. Because I know that like I have a few of my go-to candidates who will always be there, who always like come to me. And so I think just really establishing such a great relationship with us is going to be so helpful because we're going to think about you. So I would say just, create strong relationships with recruiters and make sure you find like some you can truly trust.
Caitlin, Tyler, any last words?
Well, cool. I guess for me, I know this is like a girl development event. Sorry, I'm like blanking out. But being a woman in this industry is a weapon. It's a power. Like use it to your advantage. Like there's not a lot of women here, so it's always nice for managers to see women be developers and stuff. So make sure you use that to your power, I guess. Yeah.
My last closing is know your skills and fight for it and let us know. And we want to fight for you. We want to get you these jobs. So just know your skills and definitely let us know too. And we'll definitely fight for them.
Okay. Thank y'all so much. I enjoyed the session. Always, these are some of my favorite people I work with all the time. I hope that y'all enjoyed it as well. And real quick, because I forgot at the beginning, I got to get that screenshot with all us smiling. So y'all know the drill. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Again, thank you so much. And thank you to Katie and Katie from Girl Develop It who invited us in to join this session as well. It's always so great collaborating with you year after year. And, let's get some great things scheduled out for 2022. I can't believe we're almost there.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.